In the news this morning in Business Tech, there's an article that speaks about President Cyril Ramaphosa signing new bills into law. And one of these bills are really very exciting, and I will discuss it with you in detail just now. The headline of the article reads, Ramaphosa signs new bill into law, including one that could shake up South African politics. Now, I can tell you that it's already shaking up South African politics. And one of my previous articles that I did on the DA actually retrenching staff and struggling financially will attest to that. It reads, President Cyril Ramaphosa has signed 3 new bills into law, giving effect to a number of previous constitutional court rulings. So he has no choice but to sign these into law. The Constitutional Court ruled, people took the government and the legal framework to court, and the Constitutional Court ruled that certain things needs to be done to rectify these laws. And what has happened is the government had to come up with new bills that give effect to what the Constitutional Court has said. Now, these bills are not tested in the Constitutional Court, so they don't have to give feedback to the Constitutional Court. We have to decide if these bills cover what the original case was asking for. So if we're not happy with what the bill says, we can go back to the Constitutional Court and say that this bill is not giving effect to what we asked for in the first place. So keep this in mind as I go along. The acts which were assented to on the 26th of March deal with a range of issues, including one that grants legislative status to the office of the hydrographer as part of the country's navy, and one that deals with the suspending, disciplining, or removing an independent police investigative directorate executive director. So there was obviously not provision within our law to take care of this when the Constitution clearly provided that there was a need for that. So many of our laws are unconstitutional or does not cover the Constitution. So we are in a transition still from pre-democracy, and we are transitioning very, very slowly, because it's like everyone after 1994 just went and sat back and thought everything is hunky-dory, when we were supposed to still transition, continue transitioning. We were supposed to even come up with a new national anthem. We were supposed to even consider a new flag. I mean, there's many things that could have happened. The legal framework, the way we govern the people of South Africa, everything that we got was a transitional process. And we somehow just got stuck there and did nothing afterwards. Why? Because it suits political parties. It doesn't suit the people of the country. And this will become apparent as I continue. However, the most important new piece of legislation is arguably the Promotion of Access to Information Amendment Act, which will require political parties to record their funding. Now, for those of you that don't know, you actually pay for each and every political party to remain in Parliament, which is a travesty and should be removed. Now, this bill doesn't look at that, but I want to mention it now because it's relevant. All political parties represented in Parliament actually gets taxpayers' money, which helps them to stay there. When new political parties that want to enter the fray, like they should under the Constitution, get zero assistance, even when they are registered. So the parties that actually remained in Parliament when the transition happened in 1994 had a huge advantage because they were already funded. How is this fair and democratic? Well, it is not. And like I said, I will still do a video on that. I want to make sure that we're over 5,000 subscribers before we do that. We're over 4,500 subscribers and strong on our way there. I want to thank you very much for your time and efforts in commenting and subscribing. At this stage, I cannot get to all your comments. I will make a comment after each video that I pin to the top to thank you for your time and your efforts and the amazing growth the channel has experienced. And the next part of this video that I'll be discussing now is extremely, extremely important and is a victory for your rights and my rights and the country, and for a better form of democracy, which we have to keep on improving because our current system is not democratic. and we can prove that in the state that the country is in. Let's continue. So, political parties, they will now have to make available how they get funds, and the details will come out now. The Act makes it an obligation for the head of a political party. So, in the case of the ANC, it will be Cyril Ramaphosa. In the case of the DA, it will be John Steenhuisen. In the case of the EFF, it will be Julius Malema. The head of the party, okay, is responsible, including independent candidates. Because under our constitution, we are allowed to be independently elected, but the IEC does not allow this in their regulations. And the Constitutional Court has ruled on this and said that a provision has to be made for independents to be elected, and this is what I am promoting. So they are already making provision for a time when independents could be elected. So here in this case, an independent can only exist as a councillor in local council, not within the provincial parliament, not within the national parliament, and this is a huge problem. Okay, so the Act makes it an obligation for the head of the political party, including independent candidates, to create and keep records of any donation exceeding the prescribed threshold in any given financial year. Now, there's a prescribed threshold that government came up with. The Constitutional Court did not come up with this amount, and this could actually be challenged in the Constitutional Court, and I would actually challenge that. Because the threshold that they came up with was 100,000 Rand. Now that's a significant amount of money. This threshold is currently set to include any donations exceeding 100,000 Rand. So you can give 100,000 Rand, and if it doesn't exceed that, the party doesn't have to disclose it. Now you can add up a whole lot of 100,000s and it can come to millions or even billions. If you in a very sly way make that money come from very different angles, but it actually comes from the same funder. Now the reason for this bill is important, and I'll explain that now. Political parties are also required to record the identity of the persons or entities who made such donations. But remember, this is above 100,000. So if you donate 100,000, doesn't need to be disclosed. That is significant. Make the records available every quarter. So every 3 months, you have to make these records available. Keep the records for at least 5 years after the records concerned have been created. Okay? So you have to keep those records for a 5-year period. So people make sure that once these records are available, that if you're interested in democracy, and you should be, that you download these, keep it somewhere, and scrutinize them every time before elections. Okay? The Act will commence at a later date determined by the President by proclamation in the Government Gazette. Now, why doesn't he do it immediately? Why didn't he do it before the 2019 elections? Because the judgment in the Constitutional Court happened before then. He wanted to hide for one last time where they're getting their money from. And the DA is now running out of money because people don't want to show that they're actually donating to them. The judgment is attached in this article, and I always attach the articles in the description below the video so you can view it there and you can actually go and read the judgment. Maybe I have time to cover it right now. So the Constitutional Court ruling giving you an insight into why they said this needs to happen. The Act comes after the 2018 Constitutional Court ruling, so it was a year before the 2019 national elections, which found that the state is under a constitutional obligation to do everything reasonably possible to give practical and meaningful expression to the right of access to information and the right to vote. Okay? So access to information and the right to vote. So important is the obligation to record, preserve, and make private funding information reasonably accessible to the voting public, that it must also be easily accessible to the media, to NGOs, academia, and other political players, which is all of us. The majority of the court also held that the disclosure of private funding would help the public to detect whose favors political players are likely to return. It's really sad that this has to be the state of affairs, but this is where our country is at. once elected into public office. So what the court is saying is that they want the public or anyone else to scrutinize the amount of money given to a party, because what they're saying is it's obvious that the parties are then beholden to these people that donate large sums of money to them, which is really a constitutional problem, a huge constitutional problem, and that is why I believe the system needs to be changed so that we elect individuals, which is made for, a provision is made for in our constitution, but it's not done currently. So people, it's not that this is a foreign concept. Many countries elect individuals because it's much easier to remove an individual than it is to remove a party. We know this. The ANC said they will rule until the Savior comes, the second coming. They will stay in power, and they've declared that. So they're not willing to give up power, and they will never give up power without a fight. They will turn into obvious terrorists very fast when that happens. Let's continue. The court concluded that the current parliamentary process in relation to a private funding regulatory framework will in no way be interfered with or undermined by the judgment. These are two distinct yet necessary processes, it said. Now, this is really, really awesome. The fact that the court has ruled in a way that is giving us a voice and making us important, us as the public. And the Constitutional Court wants to protect our rights as the public. And I still have time to go through this court judgment. So the ruling or the amendment of this act, the actual act says, to amend the Promotion of Access to Information Act 2000 so as to provide for information on the private funding of the political parties and independent candidates to be recorded, preserved and made available, and to provide for matters connected therewith. Okay, so it says Section 1 of the Protection of Access to Information Act, hereinafter referred to as the Principal Act, is hereby amended. So they're changing the current act. By the substitution for the definition of head of the following definition: head of or in a relation to a private body means in the case of a natural person, including a person referred to in paragraph C of the definition of political party. They had to do this because in the judgment it said that the head of a political party has to provide the means by which this is done. So they will be held accountable. So the head of all the political parties will be held accountable to make provision for all of these, all of the funding that they have received. Okay? And it's important to understand that this helps you to scrutinize, which means we need to become more politically active and be aware of the parties, what they're doing, the parties we want to vote for, and promote every day that we don't want to vote for parties anymore. We're not saying parties must vanish. The parties will still remain, but we need to make sure that we say we want to vote for individuals so that that individual can be held accountable. No matter what party they're for, that the individual runs for president, premier and mayor, and that the MPs elected in different constituencies, that they run as individuals, that we elect them as individuals. Because at the moment, the parties elect all these people. And like I said, I will do a video on how people are elected, because most of the public aren't aware that they actually have no rights with regards to that, which is a huge constitutional problem, in my opinion, with regards to having a better form of democracy. So they say here, by the insertion after the definition of personal requester of the following definition, political party means any entity that accepts donations principally to support or oppose any registered political party or its candidates in an election as defined in Section 1 of the Electoral Act. So they include here that a head of a party and anything that is a political party that can receive donations are included in this act, or candidates that could be included in this act. So that also means an individual running as a candidate for something. So it is really awesome that this is happening right now. And it carries on to state here that the following section is hereby inserted in the Principal Act after Section 52, recording, preservation and disclosure of records on private funding of political parties. So if we're not happy with what it says here, we can actually take this new bill to the Constitutional Court and query it. It says to create and keep records of any donation exceeding the prescribed threshold that has been made to that political party in any given financial year. As I've said, 100,000 you don't need to disclose, above 100,000 you need to disclose. And the identity of the person or entities who made such donations. Now this in itself is already a huge victory, because someone that is trying to manipulate a party will donate to them. No one knew who they were, and they were actually forcing the party to toe their line. Now with the amount of money that the parties receive, the amount that you donate obviously dictate how influential you end up being. And like I said, with individuals, this is not going to stop. The same thing will continue, but the scrutiny will still be there, and it's much easier once again to remove an individual than it is to remove a party. They will make the records available on a quarterly basis as prescribed and keep the records for a period of at least 5 years after the records concerned have been created. For the purposes of this section, donation means a donation as defined in section 1, which we covered earlier. Financial year means a year as defined in section 1, and prescribed threshold means a prescribed threshold contemplated in section 9.1. And we know that that is 100,000 Rand. So this is really good news for democracy, making democracy better. The one thing we still need to do is hold the IEC accountable for not allowing MPs to run individually, or for provincial MPLs to run individually. Councillors can run individually, but a mayor is still elected by a council, not by the people. We need to change this. And it's important that step by step these things are happening. We're putting pressure on them. Actually, with regards to an individual election, I have been to meetings discussing this with numerous people. This is a huge mission of mine, to make sure that everyone speaks about individual election. It's allowed for in the Constitution, people. So why is our government not allowing this? We need to question that. Ask the questions. Would the people that are elected into Parliament right now, into Council right now, be able to be there on their own fruition? Would they be able to campaign and speak with common sense and intelligence so that people can judge them? No, that's not what's happening right now. Political parties can pick whoever they want. You vote for the party and they decide who is put into that position. This has failed our country. It's clearly failed our country. Speak of change all the time and change will happen. Ask for change and change will happen. I will start and I will lead this specific fight. I don't know how politicians are going to end up making this happen, and I really don't care. I'm not going to get involved in that. But what I will drive is that the change in the electoral and the political system must happen. The current gang system must fall. This is really good news. Subscribe to my channel, click the bell icon if you want to get notifications of new videos. Thank you very much. I'm going to enjoy my eldest son's 11th birthday today, and I will be back with you tonight.